Hello, welcome back to my YouTube channel. If you're new here, my name's Katie and I'm an artist living in the south of England. And back in August I started a daily painting challenge where I create art every day except for Saturdays, so 6 days a week. And every 2 weeks on YouTube I do a roundup, so I just talk a little bit about how I'm finding the challenge and I talk a little bit more about my thoughts behind each piece. So I've got a big stack of sketchbooks here and my little list just to run through every piece, and we're just going to jump right in. To kick off week 22 and day 126, I did a double page spread in this very large, it's bigger than A4 sketchbook, and I created this tiger painting. So the thoughts behind this one was obviously that 2022 is the year of the tiger, and I painted this the day after New Year's Day. And I'd seen a lot of tiger artwork on Twitter and I was inspired to create my own. I don't think I've ever drawn or painted a tiger before, so this was very new for me. And I did do a quick sketch, which you'll see in a minute because I incorporate it into the next days. I did do a quick sketch beforehand just to work out what tigers look like. And I did reference quite a few tigers from Google Images. But I kind of prefer the sketch, although I am happy with how this one turned out. I feel like he's got a lot of personality. The body shape isn't quite right, he's a bit too elongated. I wanted him a little bit fatter. He's still a chunky boy, but it's not quite how I imagine it in my head. But I am really pleased with this painting. It feels very vibrant, I love the colours. It kind of feels like a print that could go up in a children's bedroom. It was kind of hard to edit because the paint is very vibrant in real life. This was the artwork that was chosen for my Patreon reward, so every month I send out a postcard, which is an A5 print to my patrons on that reward tier. And so converting it to CMYK, which it's needed for print, was a little bit tricky. And obviously the original painting is always going to be much brighter, but I am really pleased with this one. I kept it quite simple in the background. Obviously, there's a lot of trunks back there, so it kind of looks like a bamboo forest. But I added some Neocolor pastel on top and I included the little bits of pink, which I think works really, really well. Like I said, I'm really pleased with how fun this came out and I had a lot of fun painting it. This was created in acrylic paint, which I don't often use. Usually I use gouache. So it was nice to work big. And yeah, like I said, I had a lot of fun with this one and it was a great way to kick off 2022. Day 127 is still in a larger sketchbook, but this one's the A4 Talens one, and I just had so much fun with the tiger and I really wanted to explore it a little bit more, that I just carried that theme on to this day. So like I mentioned, I included the sketch which is on the gridded paper. I just did that in my notebook. That was the original sketch for day 126, and for this one I used a whole range of media. So I started with the one in the top left, which was just done it with coloured pencil, and that's how I'd normally approach drawing this. Like, it's quite realistic in terms of its shape, so I really wanted to explore, because that's my goal for the daily art challenge now. It's just to explore and have fun and to try out lots of things. And one of the things I found when I was painting the tiger was how much you can stylize it and how much you can change it. And so this whole page I just wanted to do a whole heap of tigers and faces, because just changing like the shape of the head or the shape of the nose just makes such a difference. So there's some here that are collage, like the top left and the top right, and then obviously there's one which is done in tombos and two done in acrylic paint again. This one's tombos as well, and this one's coloured pencils. So just a huge mix, and again I had so much fun with this. It just felt like I was really tapping into what I wanted from this challenge, which was just to follow that spark of inspiration, and on this day it was still carrying on that tiger theme. Usually I'll paint something and then I'll move on, whereas this one I really felt like I could explore it more, and so I'm really glad that I did. So I really like the spread. It's obviously very vibrant again, and I think there's a lot of fun in it. It's just in a sketchbook, so I didn't mind like things like folding over the edge or anything. I added a few swatches up the top as well. And it just feels like what sketchbooks are supposed to be for, just experimenting and playing. And I really like the result, so it's a bonus. Day 128, I'm still in the sketchbooks, and for all of these I'm actually staying in my sketchbook, so there's no loose pieces. But this one was in my A5 Talens, and I was really feeling inspired at this point. I was really riding the wave after my little break and having a little rethink about my daily art challenge, and I was really feeling inspired to create. And that feels really nice. So for this one, I painted this fish. And this is a Redear Sunfish, and the inspiration for this one came from a New York Times crossword answer. A lot of the time I get asked where I get the ideas to draw something from, and usually I'm not sure. Usually I'll look at something and I'll get some like colour inspiration or something. But for this one, I know exactly where it came from. I just wanted to draw it because I thought it sounded interesting. When I actually looked it up, it's a very boring fish. It's not colourful at all, so I definitely used some artistic license here and made it a lot more colourful. It's kind of like, in different pictures it looked kind of yellowy or greeny, so I really bumped up the saturation on this piece. And this was mostly done, the fish itself was done with Neocolor pastels. Usually I just use them as a layer on top of paint, but for this one I just went really with the Neocolor pastels only, and then to fill in the background, because it was looking a bit sparse, I just used some gouache paint around here with the blue. And I'm really proud of this one. It feels still really fun, which is great, and I like the little colour swatches I added at the bottom too. So this one was a really fun one. I love his little expression, and although he doesn't really look this fun in real life, I had a lot of fun drawing him. Day 129, we're staying in the A5 Talens sketchbook, and when I reset my creative challenge, I decided that I needed to let go of the expectation on myself to create finished art every day. And obviously that will depend on my mood, and you'll see like I did create a lot of finished artwork. But on this day I wasn't feeling it, so I decided to do my first ever page of swatches. And actually this is the first swatch page I've ever done. I've swatched a few colours like here and there, but I've never done like a full-on swatching session. So the theme for this one was my favourite art supplies from last year. So there's like a theme to these swatches. Obviously it's not everything that I own, but these were my favourite ones from last year. So there's obviously a lot of natural ones, there's a lot of greens and browns and greys and creams and some blues. So you can kind of see that I do prefer to do nature and landscapes. And then I did swatch the whole Himi gouache set down here and a few of my favourite gouache tubes as well. But I really love how this turned out. I think it's a really colourful page, and it really didn't take much brain power, but it was still creative. So if you're feeling stuck and like you want to draw but you're feeling a bit frustrated, I really recommend doing an exercise like this and just going into your sketchbook and having fun with your favourite art materials. This one has done incredibly well on Instagram, and it always makes me laugh because it's always the ones that don't take much effort, like brain power or effort painting, that do well on social media. But this one's a really fun, happy, easygoing spread, so I think the colourful aspect of this definitely helped make it more likeable on social media. And I'm really happy with this one, considering like it was an off day. I'm still happy that I now have given myself permission to create something like this. Day 130 was very different for me and was part of my resolution to change the daily art challenge. And this was a study of an illustration by Alfred Thon. I created a reel on Instagram, and if you saw my video where I explained why I was changing and like my resolutions for the daily art challenge this year, then you'll have seen this one being created, and I'll pop a link down below as well. But this one, I don't think the result is very pretty, but it definitely was really interesting for me to have a play around with it. I haven't done like studies of artworks for a very long time, I think probably since secondary school or A-level, and I had a lot of fun playing with ink, so that's not a medium I usually use to paint with. And like you can see over here, I just had fun with the different colours, and I really like the contrast between this green and the black. It's not like super black, but I was just playing around with like water and the ink, and thankfully this is quite thick paper. So this is in an Eco Sea White sketchbook, and it did buckle a little bit, but it held up pretty well considering how much water I threw at it. It's not a perfect study, like you can see it really lacks details and stuff, but the main thing was that I just wanted to give my brain a break from thinking something up, and I think studies of artists is a really great way to do that, because you know the colour palette's going to work, you know the layout's going to work, and you can just copy what they've done. Obviously you can't make prints or anything from it, but I think it's really good for us as artists to practice and try things from artists that we wouldn't normally pick. This is a study from a book that contains like all of Hans Christian Andersen's stories, and my dad gave it to me, and it's a gorgeous book full of really lovely illustrations, and when I saw that, I really wanted to do my own version. One of the things that I think I find most interesting about this is the colour palette. So when I look at these, like they're obviously very bright colours, and it just is crazy to me how you can like create something like this, which is quite moody and dark, from these really bright primary colours. And that's what I took away from this study, and I'm really pleased to have learnt that, and I think it's really interesting. Day 131 is in the A4 Talens sketchbook, and this was a big mix of different things that I just kind of stuck in and worked around. So it started with the piece on the left in the craft brown paper, and I really wanted to experiment drawing on the different coloured paper and an experiment in the background. I really wanted to blend the different colours of the Prismacolors. So I did that piece, and then I wanted to continue the experimenting, and so I stuck it in this sketchbook page and then did some more playing around with ink. So the day before this I was doing the Alfred Thon study, and so I had the ink on my desk, and I just decided to play around with it in here. This paper, which is the A4 Talens, it's not the best paper to do experiments with ink in, because it does bleed through and buckle, but I just wanted to play around with the colours. So you can see I just used a blue and a black one, and then I paired that with the yellow. So this is reference from a copyright-free site, and the colours of that reference picture isn't like this at all. So it was really good for me to try and change the colours there, and I really love the contrast of the yellow with the blue and the black. And because I was having fun with the ink, I added some swatches down here, just playing with the way that they interact with each other, and I created these like coral organic shapes down here. And again, I tried that on another piece of paper and stuck that in there as well, just to keep it all together. And these, I think, are the most interesting part of the spread. But if I hadn't done anything else on this page, if I hadn't done these first, I wouldn't have got to here, which I think is the main thing to take away. I just really love the texture that the ink has made when it's blended in with each other to create these like coral shapes. And it's definitely something I want to explore a bit more. This feels like more where I want the art challenge to be in terms of experimenting, but it still feels a little bit forced. It doesn't feel totally natural to work in this way yet, but I think it's a good stepping stone. And like I say, I'm really happy that it led me to these things, which wouldn't have happened otherwise. On to week 23 and day 132, I created a piece in my Perfect Sketchbook, which is by Etchr, and there is a little review that I've done on my challenge, so I'll pop that link down below as well. But I wanted to use some ink, and I used some acrylic ink, which I've only ever used once before for a frog painting, which you can also find on my channel. But this time I wanted to play around with it with a dip pen. And this is the result, so I'm really happy with this. I think there's a lot of expression in this cute little tortoise's face. I'll pop the link to the reference down below, and for every piece of art that I do, I keep track of the references, so they'll be all in the description box. But this one I used the dip pen and ink, and I really love using dip pen because of the variety of line. You can make it go really thick or thin, and sometimes you don't have control over that, so I think that's where the fun really comes from with dip pens. Acrylic ink isn't water-based, so make sure you wash your dip pen quickly after you've used it, otherwise it won't come out like normal ink. But it was really fun to use, and I'm really glad I added on the shadows and the like shading on the face, because I think that helps, and I just did that with a brush afterwards. But I had a lot of fun creating the pattern on his shell, and I really like where like the pen has gone a bit wrong. So like obviously there's ink blobs at the top, and down here there was like too much that came out. You're getting a little peek there from the next one, but I'm really happy with this one. It's fun again, and I think these weeks I definitely found my fun again with the challenge, which is really important to me. And yeah, I'm really happy with this one. I think it's really fun. So for day 133, as you may have just seen, it was this starling. And I did this in the Etchr sketchbook again because the paper is really thick, it's 300 GSM, and I created this using calligraphy ink. So not acrylic ink like this one was, but Winsor & Newton calligraphy ink. And you can see in the wing where I really layered up the different inks and allowed them to blend together to create this effect. You definitely need really thick paper for that, otherwise it will struggle and warp the paper, but it held up really well in this sketchbook. And I'm really proud of this one. This one was for Birdfest, which is a prompt challenge for January hosted by Birdie Tam, and I'll again pop the link down below for that one. But it's a different bird every day in January, and this was starling. So starlings, like, I really was interested. They're beautiful birds, and in the different light you can see the hues of like greens and blues in their feathers. On first glance I think you'd think that they're just like a normal black or quite a dark coloured bird, and so I really wanted to emphasise the colours that you can see in their feathers. And the same with a lot of birds, how if you look closely there's a lot of different shades in there rather than just the one. So I did the bird body in ink, and then I went over the top with some gouache. So you can see for the feathers and some of these pattern details here that I used a cream coloured gouache. And these little like arrows and spots on the chest do actually span the bird all the way up, but I decided to be quite minimal with them because I didn't want to cover up the ink pattern. So although in reality a starling is covered in these little spots, I kept it quite minimal for this one, so I wouldn't say it was super accurate, but I am really pleased with it. It's very vibrant, I love the colour palette, and I'm really glad I added a pink background because I think that just finishes it off really nicely, and that's just done in gouache. Day 134, we're back in the A5 Talens sketchbook, and I created another study, this time of this film scene. So this is from the film Portrait of the Lady on Fire, I believe, and I found this on an Instagram account that shares a lot of different screenshots of film scenes, and I really love that idea. And obviously, again, like with the art study, you don't have to worry about the colour palette or the composition because that's already been done for you. You can just study what you see. And again, I'll pop the link down below for that Instagram account, but there's a huge amount of films that they cover. And this one really stood out to me for the colours. I really loved the green. So I did this one in gouache in here, and it's very messy. Close up you'll be able to see, like, I kept things quite loose. I just used one brush for this, and it was probably a little bit big, but I mostly wanted to focus on colour for this one. Obviously I could have added a lot more detail, and I wasn't sure whether I should have gone in with my coloured pencils and added a bit more to it, but in the end I'm really glad I stopped when I did. Again, it was mostly a study on colour, and so I added all the swatches down the bottom, and although this one's quite simple in its execution, and obviously, you know, it's quite minimal in terms of detail, I think it was a good challenge for me to only use gouache and not rely on my details layer like I normally do, and also just focus on the shapes of everything. And I think it all comes across, despite not having all the details. You can tell it's a figure there, and so yeah, I think this one was quite successful, and it was again another thing that I want to do more of with the film studies. Day 135, I woke up that day and I had no idea what to draw. I wasn't feeling super inspired, but the sun was shining and the sun was coming in through the window here in the studio so nicely, and it really lit up the pilear plant that I have on the windowsill. And so the way that the light was shining through the pilear leaves meant that the shadows were really showing on that front leaf. So for day 135, I painted this pilear. And to be honest, it's quite a basic painting. It's very simple, but I'm really proud of it. I think it's a really lovely painting and a really nice study of light and shadow. I don't paint from real life very often, so it was really nice to not be like staring at my screen for the reference, but actually looking over on the windowsill and painting what I saw. And I just really love the simplicity of it. I thought it would look a bit odd. Like when I was painting this, I thought it looks a bit weird that like obviously you've got the shadows here, and I wasn't sure if it would come across that it was shadows. And I'm still not 100% convinced if it does. But I really love the tones. I really love the shade of greens that I chose here. And the pot I shaded in a way that kind of feels more realistic than the actual leaves. So this feels very stylized, and this feels a little bit more like realistic almost, just because it's got the highlights there and the shadows. But I really love the contrast there. The composition isn't great. I think I would have liked a bit more pink here and like centered this a little bit more. But considering it's just in the sketchbook, I think it doesn't matter. And I think this one would make a really nice print actually. I've done a few plants before, and I've done the pilea before. Last year when I had like 10 minutes and I needed a quick thing to do for the daily art challenge, I did do a little pilea plant then. But this feels a lot more in tune with what I want to create, and again it's another study of light and shade this time, and it was really enjoyable to do. So I'm really proud of this one. Again, I like the colour palette against the pink. Pink backgrounds just seems to be my go-to at the moment. But yeah, I was really pleased with this one. For Christmas, I received this tiny sketchbook, which is the smallest sketchbook I've ever used, and I've also never used a square one. This is by Talens, and it's an art creation sketchbook, which is the same brand as the A5 and A4 one I use regularly. So for day 136, I did some quick drawings in this one. These were all timed, so they all took 4 minutes except for this little town scene, which took 5 because there was a lot more detail in there. But I'm really happy with how these came out. They were all referenced from photos I'd taken from a holiday a few years ago with my sister in Athens. And I just really love the looseness of these. They feel very bright, and I feel like even though they didn't take very long, and obviously the speed comes through because they're not very well finished, I still feel like there's a lot of personality to them, and I'm really proud of how these came out. It feels like the looseness that I want to achieve in my work all the time. So definitely time challenges and trying to be quick helps with my not overthinking. So I really recommend timed challenges, especially with an amount of time which isn't very long. I really recommend those if you're trying to loosen up with your work and not overthink. Out of the 5 that I did, I think my favourite is the first one and also the second, because I just really like the focal point of the bench. I think that works nicely. And although the view, which is the main point of this sketch, isn't very well rendered, I just really like the scene, and I'm really happy with these considering I did them in 4 minutes each, and I really enjoyed working at this scale. It felt like I could just spend a short amount of time with it, and it wasn't scary to fill up the page because it is so small. And it was also really interesting to create in a square format as well, which I don't do very often. So these were done with Tombow brush pens, some Ecoline brush pens, and then some Neocolor pastels and Prismacolor pencils over the top. They were very rushed, but I really loved the result of these, so I was very happy to start the sketchbook in a really positive way. So the last piece is day 137, and I'm back in the A5 sketchbook. I didn't really have an idea of what I wanted to draw today, so one thing I recommend is looking back through your sketchbook and seeing if you tried something or if there was something that you find that you remember was particularly fun. So that's what I did on this day, and I remember that I have drawn in panels before and how much I enjoy that. So that's what I did for this one, and I went on Google Maps and dropped a pin somewhere in Sweden and created these little house drawings. So I split up the page into panels first, just using a grey pencil, and then I just went down the street and found houses which I thought were colourful and pretty, and then I drew them in the panels. And I just kept moving Google Maps down the street to draw a different house each time. And I'm just really pleased with how this came out. I always enjoy drawing houses, and this has done really well on Instagram as well, so I'm glad that the enjoyment comes across, because I definitely want to do more of these. Houses here in England Obviously you get the old ones, but I love drawing the different colours, and you don't often see like different colours sliding like you do in other places in Europe. And so I'm always drawn to places like Finland or Norway or Sweden for panels like this, just because they have nicer houses. And I think the colours definitely is what makes this spread so nice to me. But I really love the little details. I love adding on like the sliding details and the little window panes. And again, this was done mostly with Tombows, Neocolor pastels and coloured pencils, so there's no paint here. And this did take quite a while, but I just took my time with drawing the houses. There was no rush. I didn't want to do another time challenge because I did that the day before. So I just took my time with this one and just had fun with my Tombow markers. I even drew a couple of cars, which I don't often do. Usually I'll just leave them out of the scene. And they're a little bit wonky, but I think that really adds to the character of these. And overall, I think this is a really nice spread, and I'm really happy to have ended the week on it. So that rounds up weeks 22 and 23 of the Daily Art Challenge. I think I rambled a little bit more and talked a bit longer than I usually do for these ones, so I hope it was interesting and not too rambly. I'd love to know which is your favourite piece that I've shown you today down below in the comments. I think mine is possibly the last one, so the houses in the panels, or the fish, just because I think he's really fun and I love how colourful he is and that I made him. But I'm really happy with the work that I created in these past 2 weeks. I definitely felt more inspiration than I had in a long time since I changed up like the rules of my Daily Art Challenge, which is really exciting for me. And I definitely feel like I'm having more fun, and I'm hoping that's coming through in the art as well. I really hope you enjoyed this video, and I'd love to hear your thoughts down below. If you want to follow me on Instagram to see each piece every day, then you can follow me at Katie_Moody over there, or I'll be back in a couple of weeks with another daily roundup. And of course, I'll be back next Sunday with a different YouTube video. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate you being here, and I will see you soon. See you later.